No hugs, no touches, no sex for over a year. I was patient. Then I found lingerie photos sent to a number I recognized. It wasn't a man. It was her yoga instructor. After our son was born, everything changed. Not just the sleepless nights or the constant crying that I expected. What I didn't expect was for my wife to become a complete stranger. The woman who used to curl up against me every night suddenly couldn't stand to be touched. She'd flinch when I'd reach for her hand, move away when I tried to hug her, and forget about anything more intimate. At first, I told myself it was normal. The internet said postpartum changes were common. Her body had been through trauma. She was exhausted. We were both exhausted. I'd watch her with our son, seeing glimpses of the woman I married when she'd smile at him or sing those little lullabies. But the moment she looked at me, it was like a wall went up. I tried everything I could think of. I took overnight feedings so she could sleep. I did all the household chores without being asked. I brought her coffee in bed, bought her favorite flowers, suggested date nights that she'd always decline. When she said she needed space, I gave her space. When she said she was too tired, I understood. When months passed without so much as a kiss goodnight, I told myself to be patient. The loneliness was crushing. I'd lie awake next to her, listening to her breathe, feeling like we were strangers sharing a bed. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at couples holding hands in the grocery store, wondering if we'd ever be like that again. I started working longer hours just to avoid coming home to the silence. Her friends would ask how we were doing, and I'd smile and say we were adjusting well. But inside, I felt like I was disappearing. Every attempt at connection was met with exhaustion or irritation. She'd spend hours on her phone, but couldn't find 5 minutes to really talk to me. I began to wonder if she even loved me anymore, or if having a baby had shown her that she'd made a mistake marrying me. The yoga classes started around our son's 6-month mark. She said she needed to get back in shape, needed some time for herself. I encouraged it, hoping it might help her feel better about her body, maybe bring back some of that confidence I'd fallen in love with. She'd come home from these classes glowing in a way I hadn't seen in months, talking about how good the stretching felt, how the instructor was so understanding and supportive. I was happy she'd found something that made her smile again, even if it stung that it wasn't me. She'd mention her instructor occasionally, how patient she was, how she really got what new mothers were going through. I thought it was nice that she'd found someone who understood her struggles. But as weeks turned into months, something felt off. She'd spend extra time getting ready for yoga, choosing outfits more carefully than she had for anything else in months. She'd stay after class to talk, coming home later and later. When I'd ask about it, she'd just say they were working on specific poses or discussing wellness techniques. Update 1. The discovery happened on a random Tuesday evening. She'd left her phone on the kitchen counter while giving our son a bath, and it kept buzzing with notifications. I wasn't trying to snoop. Honestly, I was just going to turn the volume down so it wouldn't wake the baby if he'd managed to fall asleep. But when I picked it up, I saw the message's preview. There were photos. Photos of her in lingerie I'd never seen before. Poses that were definitely not yoga-related. Selfies taken in our bedroom while I was at work. The contact name was Emma Yoga with a heart emoji. My hands started shaking as I scrolled up, seeing weeks of messages I couldn't believe were from my wife. The conversations were intimate in ways she hadn't been with me in over a year. There were good morning texts with kissing emojis, complaints about how tired she was from our son keeping her up, but then promises about what they'd do the next time they had privacy. There were discussions about when I'd be out of the house, confirmations of when they could meet at the yoga studio after hours. I felt like I was going to throw up. This woman, this instructor who I'd encouraged my wife to spend time with, who I'd thought was helping her heal, they'd been carrying on behind my back for months. While I'd been walking on eggshells, trying to be understanding about her need for space, she'd been sharing herself with someone else. When she came out of the bathroom with our son, I was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in front of me. She took one look at my face and knew. The color drained from her face, and she quickly put the baby in his bouncer before turning to face me. She tried to explain, but her words came out in a jumbled mess. It wasn't what I thought. They were just friends. The photos were innocent. She was just feeling good about her body again and wanted to share that confidence. But I'd seen the messages. I'd seen the heart emojis and the late-night conversations and the very specific plans they'd made. That night, she finally told me the truth, at least part of it. She and her instructor had connected emotionally in a way she hadn't expected. She said it started as just someone understanding what she was going through as a new mother, someone who listened without judgment. But it had developed into something more, though she insisted it was just emotional support. I asked about the lingerie photos, about the messages that clearly weren't just emotional support. She admitted they'd shared personal things, but maintained it wasn't cheating because they hadn't done anything physical. When I pressed her about what nothing physical meant, she got defensive and said I was making it into something it wasn't. The next few days were torture. She'd go to her yoga classes, and I'd sit at home wondering what was really happening. She insisted she needed that support system, that cutting off contact with her instructor would set back all the progress she'd made. I felt like I was going crazy, being told I was overreacting while also being expected to be okay with my wife's emotional affair continuing. Update 2. 3 weeks after I found the messages, I decided I needed to know the whole truth. I couldn't keep living in this limbo where I suspected there was more to the story, but was being told I was imagining things. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her to one of her evening yoga sessions. The studio was in a converted warehouse across town, the kind of place that had individual rooms for private sessions. I parked across the street and waited. She went in through the main entrance, and I could see lights on in one of the back rooms. About an hour later, I saw them through the window. They weren't doing yoga. They were sitting close together on a mat, my wife's head on her instructor's shoulder. As I watched, the instructor lifted my wife's chin and kissed her, a long, intimate kiss that definitely wasn't just emotional support. My wife melted into it in a way she hadn't with me in over a year. I sat in my car for another 20 minutes, watching them hold each other, touch each other's faces, share the kind of tender moments I'd been craving from my wife. When they started moving toward a corner of the room where I couldn't see clearly, I drove home and waited. She came home 2 hours later with that same glow she'd been having after her classes, but now I knew where it was really coming from. When she started to tell me about the wonderful relaxation techniques they'd worked on, I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I knew about the kissing. Her face went white, then red, then she started crying. Finally, the real truth came out. They had been physical, but she said it didn't count as cheating because it was with another woman and it wasn't like she was leaving me for anyone. She said it was just something she needed right now, something that made her feel like herself again. She explained that after having the baby, she'd felt disconnected from her own body, like it wasn't hers anymore. The instructor made her feel beautiful and desired in a way that felt safe and non-threatening. She said being with a woman was different, that it didn't feel like betrayal because it wasn't replacing what we had. It was filling a need I couldn't understand. But the more she talked, the more I realized how long this had really been going on. It hadn't started after the baby was born. It had started during her pregnancy. Those last few months when she'd said she was too uncomfortable for intimacy, when she'd started going to prenatal yoga classes, that's when they'd first connected. The instructor had been there for the birth classes, had visited us in the hospital, had been part of our lives before I even knew she was taking my wife away from me. The physical relationship had started when our son was about 2 months old. All those times I'd thought she was recovering from childbirth, she was actually rediscovering her sexuality with someone else. All those months I'd been patient and understanding. She'd been sharing herself with another person while I slept alone in our bed. Update 3. The confrontation that followed was unlike anything we'd ever experienced in our marriage. She oscillated between defending her relationship with her instructor and apologizing for hurting me. She'd say she was sorry, then immediately justify why she'd needed this connection, why I couldn't possibly understand what she'd been going through, why this relationship had actually saved our marriage by making her feel human again. I tried to understand her perspective, I really did. I researched postpartum changes, talked to friends who were fathers, even considered that maybe this was just a phase that would pass. But the more I learned about when their relationship had really started, the more betrayed I felt. This wasn't a postpartum crisis. This was a full-blown affair that had been going on for almost 2 years. She begged me not to ask her to end it. She said her instructor was planning to move across the country in a few months anyway, that it would naturally come to an end, and couldn't I just wait it out? She promised that once her instructor left, she'd focus completely on our family. She said she loved me and wanted our marriage to work, but she also loved her instructor and couldn't bear to hurt her by ending things abruptly. I realized then that I'd been living with a stranger. The woman I'd married wouldn't have been able to look me in the eye and ask me to share her with someone else. She wouldn't have prioritized another person's feelings over her husband's pain. She wouldn't have justified lying to me for 2 years by claiming it was for my own good. The worst part was watching her with our son during this time. She was still a loving mother, still attentive and caring with him. It made me wonder if I was the problem, if there was something wrong with me that made her able to love our child completely while keeping me at arm's length. Maybe I'd failed as a husband. Maybe I'd done something to push her away without realizing it. But then I'd remember those messages, the way she described her feelings for her instructor, using words she hadn't said to me in years. The way she'd planned their meetings with the same excitement she used to have for our date nights. The way she'd bought lingerie for another person while sleeping in old t-shirts next to me. Final update. The breaking point came when I realized she was planning to introduce our son to her instructor. She mentioned casually that she thought it would be nice if he could meet this important person in her life. Maybe they could all go to the park together sometime. She said it so naturally, like it was the most normal thing in the world to want your child to bond with the person you were having an affair with. That's when I understood that in her mind, her instructor wasn't a temporary escape or a phase she was going through. She was a permanent part of our family structure. She'd been building a life that included all of us, where I'd be expected to share my wife and help raise our child alongside her lover. I couldn't do it. I tried to be understanding, tried to wait it out, tried to believe that love and patience would eventually bring her back to me. But she wasn't coming back. The woman I'd married, who used to trace patterns on my chest while we talked about our dreams, who'd cry during romantic movies and hold my hand during scary ones, who'd stay up all night planning our son's nursery, that woman was gone. I moved out on a Thursday morning while she was at one of her yoga sessions. I left a note explaining that I couldn't keep pretending this situation was sustainable, that our son deserved to grow up seeing what healthy love looked like, and that I deserved to find someone who could love me completely. The divorce process was surprisingly civil. She didn't fight for custody or assets, maybe because she knew her affair would come to light in court proceedings. We agreed on joint custody, with me taking our son most weeknights and alternating weekends. She'd have him when I was working late or traveling. Her instructor did end up moving away, just as she'd predicted. But by then, the damage was done. She'd gotten used to living a double life, and even after her instructor left, she never fully came back to our marriage. She'd found other ways to fill that space, new friendships, new activities, new interests that didn't include me. Sometimes I wonder if things could have been different if I'd handled it better, if I'd been more understanding or fought harder for our relationship. But I've come to realize that the woman who could carry on a 2-year affair while looking me in the eye every day wasn't someone I could trust with my heart anymore. Our son is 3 now, and he's the best thing that came out of our marriage. He splits his time between our houses, and while it's not the family I dreamed of giving him, he's loved and cared for. I've started dating again, slowly and carefully, but with hope that someday I'll find someone who wants to share their whole life with me, not just the parts that are convenient. My ex-wife is happy, as far as I can tell. She has her freedom, her independence, and a co-parenting relationship that works for our son. She got what she wanted, the ability to explore who she was without the constraints of marriage, while still having the security of knowing our child was loved and provided for. I got what I didn't know I needed, the chance to find real love again, with someone who chooses me every day, not just when it's easy or convenient. It took losing everything I thought I wanted to realize what I actually deserved. The loneliness I felt during those months of rejection and confusion was nothing compared to the peace I have now, knowing that the person in my bed actually wants to be there. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from someone you love, to make room for someone who will love you back the way you deserve to be loved.